Most people think they have insulin resistance. They blame their metabolism. They blame genetics. They blame age. But what if you're not insulin resistant? What if you're just triggering the same blood sugar mistake every single morning? You wake up tired. You eat something that looks healthy. An hour later, you're crashing. Then the cravings hit. Then you blame your body. But here's what almost nobody realizes. It's not the sugar alone. It's not just the carbs. It's the pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. In this video, I'm going to break down the daily trigger that mimics insulin resistance, why your energy crashes even when you eat healthy, and the small shift that can stabilize your blood sugar within days, because insulin resistance doesn't start with your pancreas. It starts with a rhythm mistake. And once we fix the rhythm, everything changes. Most people don't realize this. You can eat the exact same meal with the exact same calories, with the exact same carbs, and your blood sugar response can look completely different. The difference? The order you eat it in. This is where most people accidentally create the illusion of insulin resistance. Let's say you eat toast, eggs, and fruit. If you eat the toast first, especially on an empty stomach, your blood sugar rises fast. Why? Because carbohydrates break down into glucose quickly. And when they hit your bloodstream without anything slowing them down, your body reacts aggressively. Insulin spikes, blood sugar rises sharply, then it drops. And that drop, that's what makes you feel tired, foggy, hungry, like your body isn't handling sugar well. But here's what's interesting. When researchers tested this, they found something shocking. When people ate protein and vegetables first and saved the carbs for last, blood sugar spikes were dramatically lower. Same meal, same carbs, different order. And the glucose curve looked completely different. This is where most people get it wrong. They think their body's broken, but sometimes it's just sequence. Why order changes everything. When you eat protein or fiber first, something powerful happens. Protein stimulates a controlled insulin response early, before a large glucose wave hits. Fiber slows gastric emptying. That means food leaves your stomach more slowly. So when carbohydrates finally arrive in the small intestine, glucose enters your bloodstream gradually, instead of flooding it all at once. Think of it like a dam. Carbs first, the gates open wide, water rushes in. Protein and fiber first, the gates release slowly. Controlled flow. Your pancreas prefers controlled flow. When glucose rises gradually, insulin can keep up. When glucose rises fast, insulin has to spike aggressively. Over time, repeated aggressive spikes make your body look insulin resistant, even if it's just reacting to poor timing. Why this feels like insulin resistance? Here's where it gets deeper. When blood sugar spikes rapidly in the morning, especially during the cortisol surge, your body is already releasing glucose from the liver. So now you have liver glucose release rapid dietary glucose, lower morning insulin sensitivity. That combination creates a larger spike than usual. Then insulin overcorrects. Blood sugar drops. Now you're tired. Now you're craving something sweet. Now you need caffeine. This cycle repeats. After weeks or months of this rhythm, your glucose readings start looking unstable. And people think, I must be insulin resistant. But sometimes you've just been eating in the wrong order. The data is clear. In controlled studies, meal sequencing reduced post-meal glucose spikes by 20 to 40%. That's massive. Without cutting carbs, without eliminating foods, without extreme dieting. Just sequence. Protein to vegetables to carbs. And here's the part most people miss. Lower spikes mean lower insulin. Lower insulin means fewer crashes. Fewer crashes mean fewer cravings. Fewer cravings mean fewer compensatory snacks. That alone can change your entire metabolic rhythm. Why this matters long term. Repeated glucose spikes increase. Oxidative stress, inflammation, vascular strain, fat storage signaling. Not because carbs are evil, but because speed matters. Your body can handle glucose. It struggles with volatility. Stability protects your pancreas. Stability protects your blood vessels. Stability protects your energy. And meal order is one of the simplest ways to create stability instantly. No supplement required. Now here's the question most people ask. If meal order changes the spike, what about liquids? What about morning drinks? What happens when you drink something first thing, before food? That's where things get even more interesting, because what you drink before breakfast can either amplify the spike or blunt it dramatically. And in the next section, we're going to break down exactly how that works at the hormonal and cellular level. Here's where this gets even more interesting. Meal order doesn't just change one spike. It trains your metabolism. Your body is adaptive. If you repeatedly hit it with fast, high glucose surges, especially first thing in the morning, it starts preparing for chaos. Let me explain. When carbs hit your bloodstream quickly, insulin rises sharply to compensate. If this happens often, cells begin protecting themselves from constant insulin exposure. Not because they're broken, but because biologically they're trying to survive overstimulation. This is where the early stages of insulin resistance begin, not from one meal, from repeated volatility. Now here's the part no one talks about. When you eat carbs first consistently, your first phase insulin response weakens over time. First phase insulin is the quick burst your pancreas releases within minutes of eating. It's like your body's shock absorber. When that response is strong, glucose barely spikes. When it weakens, blood sugar rises higher before insulin catches up. And guess what weakens it? Repeated fast spikes. So ironically, eating carbs first doesn't just spike you today. It can make tomorrow's spike worse. This is how people slowly slide into unstable glucose patterns. The cortisol amplifier now layer in something else. Morning cortisol. Cortisol naturally peaks 30 to 60 minutes after waking. Its job is to raise blood sugar so you have energy to start your day. That's normal. But if you eat fast carbs during this window, you stack glucose on top of glucose. Liver release plus dietary carbs plus lower morning insulin sensitivity. That's a triple hit. Your body responds with a larger insulin surge. Then you crash. This is why so many people feel great for 45 minutes, then tired, then hungry again, then craving something sweet. It's not weak willpower. It's physiology. You train your body to expect volatility. Why protein first changes the hormonal cascade. Now flip the order. Protein first does something powerful. It stimulates a moderate insulin release before glucose rises. Think of it like priming the system. So when carbs arrive later, insulin is already active. Glucose doesn't surge as high. At the same time, protein triggers incretin hormones like GLP-1. These hormones slow gastric emptying, enhance insulin effectiveness, improve satiety signaling. That's huge. You're not just lowering a spike, you're activating the hormonal environment that protects against spikes. This is why meal sequencing often improves energy stability, mental clarity, reduced cravings, better appetite control, all without cutting carbs, the gut speed factor. Now let's talk about digestion speed. When carbs are eaten alone, especially refined ones, they move fast. They break down quickly. Glucose absorption happens rapidly. But when fiber and protein come first, they create a physical slowing effect in the stomach. Food becomes more viscous. The rate of glucose absorption drops. And here's the key. Lower absorption speed equals lower peak glucose. Your total carb intake might be identical, but your peak, the damaging part, is lower. And peak glucose is what stresses blood vessels, the retina, the kidneys, the pancreas. Your body cares more about peaks than totals. That's why sequencing works. This is why some people do everything right, but still spike. You'll hear people say, I eat healthy, but my blood sugar still jumps. Look at order. If you're eating toast, fruit, juice, coffee, then protein last. You're setting yourself up for volatility. Even healthy carbs spike hard when eaten first. This is why two people can eat identical foods, and one has a smoother glucose curve. Sequence. Now here's where it gets even more powerful. What happens if you combine meal order with something you drink before eating? Because certain pre-meal compounds can blunt the spike even further. And in the next section, we're going to break down the pre-meal strategy that can reduce post-meal glucose by up to 30% in some studies. This is where stability becomes intentional, not accidental. Now here's where things get uncomfortable, because the problem usually isn't what you're missing, it's what you're already drinking. Most people trying to eat healthy are unknowingly starting their day with something that spikes blood sugar before 9 a.m. Let's start with fruit juice, even the ones labeled organic, even the ones labeled cold pressed, even the ones that say no added sugar. When fruit is blended or juiced without fiber, the natural sugars become rapidly absorbable glucose. Fiber normally slows digestion. It acts like a brake pedal. Remove it, and sugar hits the bloodstream fast. And when glucose rises quickly, insulin has to respond quickly. That rapid insulin release often overshoots, which leads to a crash. And that crash feels like brain fog, shakiness, irritability, cravings, sudden fatigue. Most people blame lack of sleep, but physiologically it's reactive hypoglycemia, a rebound drop after a spike. Now let's talk about coffee. Coffee itself does not contain sugar, but caffeine stimulates cortisol. Cortisol tells the liver to release stored glucose. It's part of your natural wake-up process. This is important. In the early morning, cortisol is already elevated because of the dawn phenomenon. Your body is preparing you to wake up by raising blood sugar slightly. When you layer caffeine on top of that, you can exaggerate that glucose release. So even black coffee in some individuals can raise fasting glucose numbers. Now add sweetened creamers, flavored syrups, or high-carb pastries next to that coffee, and you create a double spike, hormonal and dietary. This is why some people notice their morning blood sugar is higher on days they drink coffee on an empty stomach. It's not magic, it's physiology. Another hidden issue? Healthy smoothies. Smoothies can be great if balanced, but many contain multiple fruits, honey, juice bases, and very little protein or fat. That combination digests fast and enters the bloodstream rapidly. Liquid carbohydrates digest faster than solid carbohydrates, which means faster spike. Faster spike means faster insulin surge, and faster insulin surge increases the probability of a mid-morning crash. And then crash is what makes people reach for another coffee, a muffin, a granola bar, something sweet. The cycle repeats. Now here's the overlook factor, hydration. You wake up mildly dehydrated every morning. Even slight dehydration concentrates glucose in the blood. When blood plasma volume decreases, glucose readings can appear higher. Dehydration also reduces insulin efficiency, meaning the same amount of glucose now requires more insulin to process. So if your morning routine is wake up, scroll phone, drink coffee, no water, no stabilization, you've stacked dawn phenomenon, cortisol spike, possible sugar intake, dehydration, all before 8 a.m., and then people wonder why they feel unstable by 10. It's not random. It's a cascade. And here's the key insight most channels never explain. It's not just about high sugar. It's about variability. Research consistently shows that glucose variability, repeated spikes and crashes, causes more oxidative stress than stable, moderately elevated glucose. Variability strains blood vessels. Variability increases inflammation. Variability disrupts hunger hormones. Variability stresses the pancreas. And morning is when variability is easiest to trigger. That's why the right morning drink matters. Not because it's magic, but because it prevents volatility. The drink we discussed earlier works by improving insulin receptor sensitivity, slowing carbohydrate absorption, supporting nitric oxide production, reducing oxidative stress, modulating cortisol response. Instead of forcing insulin to work harder, it makes insulin work smarter. Instead of flooding the bloodstream, it smooths the curve. Instead of chasing crashes all day, it sets stability early. And when stability is set early, your appetite, energy, and focus follow. This is where most people get it wrong. They focus on what to eat at lunch. But by lunch, the hormonal tone of the day has already been established. Morning sets the rhythm. In the next section, we're going to break down exactly how to use this drink correctly, because timing, concentration, and pairing actually determine whether it stabilizes glucose or does almost nothing. And this is where precision matters. Let's go there. Now, here's where most people mess this up. They hear about a healthy drink, they try it once, they don't notice a dramatic overnight change, and they quit. But blood sugar stability isn't about instant miracles. It's about metabolic momentum. And momentum comes from precision and consistency. So let's talk about how to actually use this correctly. First, timing. The most effective window is within the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking, before consuming carbohydrates. Why? Because this is when cortisol is naturally elevated. This is when the liver is releasing glucose. This is when insulin sensitivity is slightly reduced. If you stabilize here, you flatten the curve for the rest of the day. If you spike here, you chase balance all day. Second, drink it before food, not after. When consumed before a meal, compounds like catechins, cinnamon polyphenols, or acetic acid have time to influence digestion and insulin signaling before glucose floods the bloodstream. If you drink it after a carb-heavy breakfast, you're trying to put out a fire that already started. Third, concentration matters. Green tea should steep for at least 3 to 5 minutes, not 30 seconds, not barely tinted water. That's how you extract meaningful catechins. If using cinnamon, a small pinch is enough. Too much can irritate the stomach. If using apple cider vinegar, 1 to 2 teaspoons diluted in water is typically sufficient. More is not better. Excess acidity can damage enamel or irritate digestion. Fourth, do not sweeten it. Even natural sweeteners can blunt the stabilizing effect if they trigger insulin response. If you need flavor, use lemon, a small splash of unsweetened almond milk, a tiny amount of stevia if absolutely necessary. But the goal is metabolic calm, not stimulation. Now here's something important most people don't realize. You don't need perfection. You need consistency. Even if your breakfast isn't ideal, even if lunch varies, even if dinner fluctuates, starting stable increases the probability the rest of the day remains stable. And here's why. Morning glucose patterns influence ghrelin, hunger hormone, leptin, sensitivity, craving intensity, mental clarity, afternoon energy, stability, stress reactivity. When morning blood sugar is stable, hunger signals become more predictable. When hunger signals are predictable, decision-making improves. When decision-making improves, long-term consistency becomes easier. That's the compounding effect. Now let's address expectations. This is not a lower your blood sugar in 8 minutes gimmick. This is a stabilization tool. Some people notice fewer crashes within days. Some notice improved fasting glucose within weeks. Some simply feel steadier energy. But the biggest benefit is invisible: reduced variability, reduced oxidative stress, reduced vascular strain. And remember this: glucose damage is not loud, it's cumulative. Small daily volatility adds up, but so does small daily stability. Another thing that matters: hydration alongside this drink. Drink a full glass of water either before or alongside it. Even mild dehydration increases cortisol and reduces insulin efficiency. Water improves plasma volume, improves circulation, improves nutrient transport, improves glucose clearance. It sounds simple, but physiology is built on simple inputs repeated consistently. Now let's talk about who this benefits most. This is especially useful if your fasting glucose runs slightly elevated, you notice mid-morning crashes, you crave sugar by 10 a.m., your energy feels unstable, your A1C is slowly creeping upward. You have insulin resistance because those are signs of morning volatility, and volatility is where damage begins. If you think of blood sugar like waves, you don't want tidal waves. You want gentle ripples. This morning ritual doesn't eliminate glucose. It smooths the curve, and smoothing the curve protects blood vessels, brain function, retinal tissue, nerve endings, kidney filtration, cardiovascular health. Stability protects systems, and systems determine longevity. The most powerful takeaway here isn't that one drink fixes diabetes, it's that mornings are leverage, and leverage multiplies outcomes. If you get the first hour right, you influence the next 23. And that's how you create sustainable metabolic control. In the outro, we're going to tie this together because understanding the mechanism behind morning stability changes how you approach every meal after it. Let's close it properly. Blood sugar control isn't about extreme diets or cutting everything you enjoy. This is where most people get it wrong. It's about controlling the first domino of the day. When your morning is stable, your cravings drop. When cravings drop, your decisions improve. When decisions improve, your glucose stabilizes naturally. That's leverage. And that's why something as simple as a morning drink can quietly shift your entire metabolic rhythm. Not because it's magic, but because it works with your biology instead of against it. If this helped you understand the why behind blood sugar stability, make sure you subscribe. Every video here breaks down the mechanisms most people never hear about, so you can prevent problems before they become permanent. And in the next video, I'll show you the one breakfast mistake that silently spikes glucose even when it looks healthy. You don't want to miss that.